For the minifigure for this Kai's Titan Mech mock, I decided to make a custom Kai since I wasn't basing this mech off any Kai mech we've seen from any of the shows or movies. So I just took the new tournament robes and then gave him one of the Forbidden Spinjitzu armor plates and then his hood from Dragon's Rising Season 2 Part 1. Then I just gave him a custom sword that you see him use in basically all of Dragon's Rising. And here we go. These are the feet. They're not super complicated. They're pretty generic. I used some yellow in bottom and also some red on the bottom, but you don't see that anywhere else, so that doesn't really matter. And then I kind of took the idea for the shape of the front part of the feet from the newer Kai's mech, not Kai's climber mech, but the little mech that you can take apart and combine with Cole's, Sora, and Lloyd's mechs that look kind of the same. And then I use this piece to kind of support this, so there's a little bit of a gap so that the ball socket joint can click in there and be able to move around. Same with that's also kind of a support. I added a little bit of red, but the majority is black and white, and then the tiny bit of gold, because on the Titan mechs it's their main color, but then there's also white and black. But now time to move on to the legs, which were so much fun to build. After I finished the legs, I added them to the feet, and they looked pretty good. The color scheme and this white line here just went kind of well. It goes from these cool new red pieces down through this white line that ends in kind of whatever you want to call that piece. And then it goes down into the white of the foot. It does the same on the back, even though there's not any white on the back, but that's okay. The kneecaps are the red hats that the Legacy Stone Army Warriors have. Those Bone Warriors from like that random season in between Crystallized and Dragon's Rising. But now it's time to move on to the middle part that connects the legs together, and then moving up to the torso, head, arms, and weapon. The torso and this part of the torso, I'm not going to do a time lapse of building it because they're kind of small. I mean, the torso is not very small, but this part's kind of small. It's basically just like the lower torso part of the Titan J mech, also like the new Lloyd Dragon's Rising mech. It's pretty much like both of those, it's just red and white. And yeah, I changed up a couple things, like Lloyd's has this piece and Jay's has this type of piece, so adding those together changes it up a bit. And then I also added these pieces up here, and they'll eventually connect to the torso, and then obviously using these cool new joint pieces from some of the newer sets. And when you add it to the rest of the mech so far, dang it, that hat just keeps popping off. This hat, which is the kneecap on the other side, it just refuses to stay on. I don't know why. But yeah, once you add it to the rest of the mech, it looks pretty good. So the torso isn't really like any torso of any mechs that I can compare it to. Well, this part is a little bit like the J Titan mech and the Zane Titan mech. Cole and Lloyd's didn't have this, but Zane and Jay's did. So I thought I would keep that going for my Titan mech. So I added that on the top. And then I also added, let me pop this off. I also added this little thing. It just uses two of those pieces and then one of these, and it connects it together. And then when you put it on here, it kind of finishes this out. Plus there was a gap in the torso, so when you add that on, it fills this gap. Plus it looks kind of cool with these pieces and these pieces. These kind of look like abs. I was thinking he looked a little fat, but then I was like, actually it looks more like muscles and abs. Oh whoops, when I was building the arms, I went ahead and put this piece on, but not on that side, whatever. The annoying thing about these pieces is they're so close to whatever you put it next to that you can't put anything on this stud. You could only put one on the bottom stud because there's no second layer that it's connecting to. It's just nothing. So then you can connect it, whereas like this one, it goes into another brick at its level, so then you can't stick anything onto it because of how close it is to the other brick and the way it's made. So that's a little bit annoying with this. There's just kind of a random stud that sticks out, so that's a bummer. But aside from that, this torso works pretty well with the mech. The inside is tan, kind of like a seat cushion. You just put the minifigure down on there, and this is where the head will connect. And I use some tire hubs, I think that's what they're called, as shoulder pads. So then when you put this onto this part of the torso and these clipping into the torso, that section on the torso that I showed you earlier, then it works. And you have to bend this part back a little bit so that those things can connect there. And then once you do, it's definitely more sturdy. Then you just move the rest of the legs forward, and then it works better. This is what it looks like thus far. Those hinge pieces just connect right there, and then the Technic joint connects there as well. And yeah, it's pretty tall thus far, although I'm hoping to make it taller than any of the mechs in my collection. I don't know if I'll be able to do that, but at the end of this video I will go through all the mechs in my collection and compare it height-wise. And yeah, now it's time to move on to the head. For the head slash neck, I used this newer piece in red that comes in the Lloyd mech from Dragon's Rising as kind of like a ponytail, and then I used Kai's Island swords as, I don't know what they are, but they look cool on this head. And then I use that piece that we got in Crystallize. And then as you can see, it's kind of a line as his eyes. That's the Nexonite axe piece from whatever the name of the I don't know if he's necessarily a big fig, but the Orange Knight, that guy, it's his axe piece from Nexonites. And then for the neck, I just use those two pieces together. And to connect the head to the neck, I use this weird piece that's used for the bottom of Unikitty's head. And then you use that, whatever that's called, and then you stick it up in there, and it works as a neck. Then when you connect it to the body, that's what it looks like. And it covers up the gap in this part. You can still kind of see the minifigure's head when you put them in the cockpit, but the head covers up any little gaps. Now it's time to move on to the arms. Once I had finished the arms, it was time to add them to the mech and see the final result. Here, let me bump the camera up really fast. Oh wait, this gray piece is supposed to be on the other side. This piece, like I had shown This piece, like I had shown before, I had put it, one had like stayed connected to the torso, and the other had come off with the arm, so it was on the wrong arm. Now we can proceed. Oh, these joints are so hard to get on. There we go. And that's the finished product. Then we give him his custom weapon that I made. So I basically just took two of these newer blades, one of these spin blades, put it like that, and then made a long handle and put one of those at the end, using the same technique that Lloyd's mech did, the new Dragon's Rising Lloyd mech. And then you give it to him, and it looks amazing. Okay, so then if we move the camera down, then you can see the entire mech. So when I'm comparing him to the rest of my mech sets, I will include the height of the sword that he's holding. But I mean, it doesn't add a ton of height. I mean, it kind of does, but depending on how he's holding the sword, it doesn't add a ton of height. So Now the fun part. Now it's time to compare it to the rest of my mech collection. First comparison we have is Kai's Titan mech against Zane's Titan mech, which if you don't include the sword, pretend the sword's not there. Zane's is taller just because of that tiny little radio stick, and I mean if you have his head more like that, then they're about the same height. So the fact that Kai's Titan mech is about the same height as Zane's Titan mech is great. That's good, because then it's about the size and like referencing the size of one of the Titan mechs. So if this were to become a Lego set and be included in the line of Titan mechs, it would be about the same size as the previous ones. So this is the second comparison, but just a side note about the previous one, I bought Zane's Titan mech at a used Lego store, so that's why it's missing some pieces. Plus I had to take some pieces like that piece off for this mech, so that's why it was a little incomplete. But the second comparison we have is Kai's Titan mech versus Cole's Quake mech from the movie. If you were not including the sword, Cole's would be taller because of the Quake posters on the back. I also got this one at a used Lego store. That's why it's missing the speakers here and here, and then the other two flags. So Kai's Titan mech is almost as tall if you were to not include the sword. If you were to not include the sword or the banners, they would be about the same height. Cole's would probably be a little taller because of the swords on his head, but if you're including sword and posters, Kai's would be taller.